Good evening, welcome to This Week in Turkey. The tension between Turkey and Europe continues at full steam. After Foreign Minister Çavuşoğlu was denied entry to the Netherlands, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan accused the Dutch government of acting like Nazi remnants.
Tensions between Turkey and European countries continue. After last week's quarrel with Germany, a new diplomatic row with the Netherlands took place this weekend. The events came in the midst of the two election campaigns. The first being the Dutch general elections, which took place on Wednesday in the midst of heated debates on immigration and integration, and the second one being Turkey's constitutional referendum next month to vote a draft constitution that significantly increases executive powers of the president. On Saturday, March 11th, the Dutch government barred Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Çavuşoğlu from flying to Rotterdam to hold a rally to harness votes of the Turkish diaspora for the April referendum. After Çavuşoğlu's barring from the Netherlands, Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan accused the Dutch government of acting like Nazi remnants. On Saturday night, this time the Minister of Family and Social Policies, Fatma Betül Sayan Kaya, was stopped from entering the Turkish consulate in Rotterdam. The Dutch police escorted the Turkish minister back to Germany. The Dutch government's decision to bar Turkish ministers inflamed tensions among the Turkish community in the Netherlands. Protests took place in Rotterdam until the early hours of Sunday, when they were dispersed by the Dutch police, who used dogs and water cannons. Protests also erupted in front of the Dutch consulate in Istanbul as well. On Sunday, President Erdogan made the following statement. When those incidents began, I said those are fascist measures. I said Nazism has risen from the dead. And then I added, I thought Nazism was over, but I was wrong. On Monday, Deputy Prime Minister and government's chief spokesman Numan Kurtulmuş said that those creating this crisis are responsible for fixing it and threatened to scrap the Turkey-EU refugee deal. Kurtulmuş also announced that Turkey will impose sanctions to ban diplomatic flights from the Netherlands and to deny entry to the Dutch ambassador, who is on leave at the moment. According to Turkish foreign ministry sources, Turkey also seeks an official apology. As a response to Turkey's demand, Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte said that it is Erdogan who should apologize for comparing the Netherlands to fascists and Nazis, adding that Turkey was acting in a totally unacceptable, irresponsible manner. The war of words between the two countries hit a new high, with President Erdogan's accusation of the Dutch for carrying out a massacre of Muslim men in Srebrenica, Bosnia in 1995. Erdogan's accusation held that, although the Serbian forces were behind the massacre of the Bosnian Muslims, the Dutch UN peacekeepers also played a role by failing to protect the victims. The Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte called these remarks a vile falsification and said that Mr. Erdogan was becoming increasingly more hysterical. There are an estimated 400,000 Turkish citizens living in the Netherlands. The two countries are also important trade partners. Dutch direct investment to Turkey since 2002 amounts to $22 billion, making the Netherlands the biggest source of foreign investment in Turkey with a share of 16%. The row between Turkey and European countries continues to spread. On Monday, the Danish Prime Minister cancelled a meeting with his Turkish counterpart to protest Turkey's rhetorical attacks. Switzerland, Belgium, and Austria have expressed that Turkish ministers campaigning in their countries would not be welcomed. German Chancellor Angela Merkel criticized Erdogan for his Nazi comparisons. Lastly, a number of high-level EU officials called on Turkey to moderate its language to avoid further escalations.
Our guest via Skype tonight is Professor Gün Kut. He's a professor of international relations at Boğaziçi University in Istanbul, and his work focuses on Turkish foreign policy and the diplomatic history of the early Republican period. Welcome, Professor Kut. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us tonight. So, Professor Kut, the war of words between Turkey and the Netherlands and Germany as well has been very rough, to say the least. But there's also a widespread belief that this was majorly influenced by domestic concerns in both countries, both Turkey and the Netherlands. This obviously has much to do with Turkey's upcoming referendum and Wednesday's elections in the Netherlands. So what is your opinion on this interplay between domestic concerns and foreign policy?
In general, I agree in that we are going through a diplomatic crisis, a full-fledged diplomatic crisis, which has a very important domestic policy concern behind it. It's a diplomatic crisis in the sense that eventually it will be the diplomats who will have to clean up the mess. But the mess has been created by all involved sides, I must say, as a result of mostly domestic policy concerns, since we are probably everywhere in Europe now on the verge of elections. In the case of the Netherlands, it was yesterday. Turkey is going through a very difficult period of referendum. Upcoming elections in Germany, and so on. So when you look at the general political climate in Europe, it's prone to create these kinds of crises, and a spark would have been enough, and there was the spark. Eventually, yes, it is a domestic policy issue for everybody involved. And as we have seen in the case of the Netherlands, the political parties who were mostly involved with this crisis have benefited the most.
Thank you, Professor Kut. So now let's talk a bit about defining the current situation of Turkey-EU relations. Do you think this is a new low, or has there been other instances in the past where relations have been even worse than they are now?
The relations between Turkey and the European Union, or in general the European integration movement from the beginning, go back in time so long that there are many other lows in the relations that we can think of in the past 50 years or so. But this one is very important at the symbolic level. However, even before this crisis, the relations were not going very well, to say the least, and it was already a new law in the relations before even that crisis came into being. So how much of the current situation is the result of the diplomatic row between Turkey and various EU member states? It's difficult to say. Even without it, as I said, even without this new situation, the relations were rather tense and stagnant, I would say.
So, Professor Kut, we will keep you on the line, but we will now move on with the next video, which will tell us a bit about the history of EU-Turkey relations.
Okay.
The recent tensions between Turkey and European countries and the statements made by Turkish ministers concerning the relations in between brought Turkey-EU relations under the spotlight. So, what is the history of Turkey-EU relations? Turkey's involvement with European integration dates back to 1959 and includes the Ankara Association Agreement of 1963 for the establishment of a customs union. With the completion of the transitional period, the customs union, which constitutes an important stage of Turkey's integration with the EU, came into force in January 1996. The customs union continues to be a fundamental dimension of Turkey's relations with the European Union. A new era began in the relations between Turkey and the European Union after Turkey assumed candidate status during the Summit of Heads of State and Government in Helsinki in December 1999. At the Brussels summit held in December 2004, the decisions taken in the 1999 Helsinki summit were reaffirmed, as the Council took note that Turkey sufficiently fulfilled the political criteria and decided to open accession negotiations with Turkey on October 3, 2005. Accession negotiations were launched on the date as planned. However, in 10 years, only 14 of the 33 chapters of the acquis that require negotiations have been opened, and only one of these chapters were provisionally closed. The division of Cyprus into two separate Greek and Turkish communities represents one of the most difficult issues of the European Union's sixth enlargement round. Since the Turkish government refuses to officially recognize the Republic of Cyprus until the political and economic embargo on the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus is lifted, Turkey's non-recognition of Republic of Cyprus has led to complications within the customs union. The main stumbling block is Turkey's failure to implement the 2005 additional protocol to the Ankara Agreement and to extend its customs union with the EU by opening its ports and airports to Greek Cypriot traffic. As a result, at the end of 2006, the European Union suspended the opening of 8 chapters related to the customs union and announced that no more chapters would be provisionally closed until Turkey had fulfilled its commitment. Moreover, following the EU Council meeting of December 2009, the Greek Cypriot administration unilaterally stated that it would block the opening of 6 chapters. Despite these deadlocks in the accession process, the new EU strategy of Turkey, announced by the Turkish Minister of EU Affairs in September 2014, aims to establish new communication channels between Turkey and the European Union and to accelerate the reform process. This strategy consists of 3 legs: political reform process, socio-economic transformation during the accession process, and EU communication strategy. The current relations between Turkey and the European Union are mainly based on the EU-Turkey refugee deal. However, this deal is being used as a trump card by Ankara in response to every dispute between Turkey and European countries, including the very recent ones.
Professor Kut, my last question to you will be, how long do you think this crisis will last, and what does this tell us for the future of Turkey-EU relations?
I do not think that the crisis will last longer than the domestic political situations require. In the case of the Netherlands, it's already passed. For Turkey, we have to wait for about yet a month. So after that, I expect a process of normalization that won't take long, because Turkey and the Netherlands are partners in various areas of international politics. We have converging interests, and everybody is aware of that. So the healing will be fast enough, but we have to go through this process of domestic campaigning. As to the impact of all of that in Turkish-EU relations, as I said in answering to your previous question, Turkey-EU relations were always prone to ups and downs. Now, in the current situation, historically speaking, we have to underline two very important issues. One is that from a institutional and legal point of view, Turkey was never so close to a full membership to the EU in its history. At the same time, again, historically speaking, from a political point of view, Turkey was never, ever so far away from full membership. So institutionally we got closer, but the political conditions prevailing both in Europe and in Turkey makes this institutional framework to march to its logical end, to logical come in the foreseeable future. What does this mean? It means that Turkish-EU relations will continue at a slower pace for an unpredictable period of time, but we will not see it being drastically ended. Neither Turkey will say no to a European Union membership, nor the European Union member states will say a definitive no to Turkey. This will go on, put on the freezer, because the current climate in Europe does not facilitate Turkey's advance in the route to membership, nor Turkey's domestic situation is very keen on pursuing this. So given this situation on all the on the part of all the involved parties, it will be unrealistic to expect either an abrupt end to negotiations or to a speedy concluding of them. So we will go on like this for a while, and then don't forget. What we have today in Turkey is one of the governments who have been negotiating with the European partners in Turkey since 1959. And like all governments, this government will also have an end, and then it will be the next government's task to think about how to ameliorate the situation. And this is for the European Union member states who have to decide on Turkey's membership. Today's governments are not in a position to open their arms and embrace Turkey in this context for full membership. So they will wait for some time. The political climate in Europe eventually will change, and then things will take a different turn. So I'm optimistic. Turkey will eventually become a member, but when and to what kind of a European Union is another debate. Maybe we could discuss that another time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kut, for joining us tonight and for your comments.
Thank you. Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Now moving on with our next video. This week at Medyascope, we discussed whether the tension between Turkey and the Netherlands could spread to other countries with Joost Lagendijk, a former Green Left member of the European Parliament and the former chairman of the Turkey-EU Parliamentarians delegation. Lagendijk also served as the chairman from 2002 to 2009.
I think that would be the preferred scenario of Mr. Erdogan. He would love to see more confrontations in other countries, but you know, other countries are not stupid. They have seen what happened in the Netherlands. And one can already see how France reacted. France, they allowed Çavuşoğlu to come to France to make a speech before an audience and without demonstrations, and then to return to Turkey. So one can see that other European countries like France, but also Germany, have done, according to me, a more clever job. They don't forbid Turkish ministers to come, but they say that they should adapt to the local situation, which is one of the reasons why, for instance, in Germany, we have seen some meetings being banned, but other meetings being allowed. So I think none of the other European countries will take such a strong position as the Netherlands, because they don't have elections coming up, so there is no need to be so tough, and because they see that once you enter into a row with Mr. Erdogan, it will be him who will profit from that, and it will be bad for the relations in Denmark or in Germany or in France. So I don't think we will see a similar row again, because the other countries in Europe are more clever than the Dutch government was.
Colonel John Dorian, the spokesperson for the anti-ISIS coalition in Syria, attended a press briefing by the US Secretary of Defense via teleconference from Iraq last week. Dorian also answered questions about the Kurdish presence in Raqqa and the role of Turkey in the Raqqa campaign.
Whether they will be involved.
Colonel John Dorian, the spokesperson for the anti-Islamic State coalition, stated on Wednesday that the Syrian Democratic Forces (SDF) participation in the operation to liberate Raqqa from Islamic State was confirmed, and the discussions on the role of the Turkish army were continuing. The Syrian Democratic Forces is a multi-ethnic alliance which is mostly staffed and militarily led by the People's Protection Units (YPG). YPG is a predominantly Kurdish militia which is recognized by Turkey as a terrorist organization and as a branch of the People Workers' Party (PKK) in Syria. Dorian attended a press briefing by the US Secretary of Defense via teleconference from Iraq last week. As an answer to a question about a Kurdish presence in Raqqa and the role of Turkey in the Raqqa campaign, Dorian said, "With regard to the Kurds and whether they will be involved in liberating Raqqa, we do expect that they will be involved at some level. What I would say is we continue working with the Syrian Democratic Forces and the Syrian Arab Coalition. Right about 75% of that force that is now isolating Raqqa is Syrian Arab, and this is a reflection that is demographically fairly consistent with what you would find in that area. As far as a role for Turkey, we have made clear of many weeks, actually months, that we are open to a Turkish role in the continued operations to defeat Islamic State in northern Syria. We haven't come to an agreement about what that role will be or if there will be one, but we talk to Turkey through military channels and I believe at diplomatic levels every day. So we will have to let that continue to be worked out. It has yet to be determined." Upon being asked about the participation of the Rojava Peshmerga trained by the Kurdish Peshmerga forces in northern Iraq who desired to take part in the fight against Islamic State in northern Syria, including Raqqa, Dorian responded that they did not have any plans to incorporate them at this time. Turkish presidential spokesman Ibrahim Kalın told journalists that the plan was still being discussed. Spokesman of the Turkish government, Numan Kurtulmuş, said on Wednesday, "Who can they choose to conduct the Raqqa operation with? On the one hand, you have 3 or 5,000 YPG terrorists, and on the other hand, you have a 79 million strong stable country like Turkey."
Recent data published by the Turkish Statistical Institute, TÜİK, shows that the Turkish economy is experiencing a weak growth, with the youth unemployment rate reaching 12.7% in December 2016, the highest in almost 7 years. Economist Mustafa Sönmez evaluated the TÜİK data for Medyascope this week.
The unemployment rate has risen significantly. This is mainly due to the inability of the new labor market participants to find jobs. We do not see massive layoffs. It is true that there is a seasonal decrease in employment in agriculture and construction sectors. Yet, the increase in the unemployment rate is mainly related to the increase in the labor force participation rate. The new labor force consists of young people, new graduates, or women who have decided to work. These people have recently joined in the labor force, but only a quarter is able to find jobs. The other 3/4 are unemployed. Thus, the number of unemployed people increases. From December 2015 to December 2016, we have seen that an additional 600,000 unemployed people led the total number of the unemployed to rise to 3,900,000.
We talked about the interest rate hikes by the Fed and the Turkish Central Bank with economist Murat Saman from Bilgi University.
When the good news came from Fed, we expected the central bank to do something. The central bank considered the April 16th referendum and the double-digit inflation and decided to raise the late liquidity window interest rate from 11 to 11.75, allowing itself to uplift the funding when necessary. Today the average funding is 10.80. And it looks like the central bank will be able to uplift this number to 11.30. A 11.30 average funding rate looks plausible, considering the inflation to be 10%. We need to consider the exchange rate during the two different terms. What will happen until the referendum of April 16th and what will happen from April 16th to April 26th. For the first term, we see that a period of relaxation ensued with Fed's decision. Fed's interest rate decision is delayed until June. The central bank made its decision. Now it can use the interest rate as a weapon anytime. It had already started using it. If nothing extraordinary happens, we can see the exchange rate float around 3.60 and maybe go down to 3.55. It can float around 3.60, 3.65. But what will come after the referendum is a whole other story. The markets will price the result of the referendum.
Our friend Zeynep Ekmekçi talked about the worsening medical conditions in Syria with Aitor Zabalgogoyaskova, who is the Turkey representative of Doctors Without Borders.
Specifically about medical assistance, there are two trends. One is related to the violence directly, and the second one is to the magnitude and the length of the conflict in Syria. Related to the violence, the fact that a lot of the structure has been destroyed, a lot of the current structure is underground or you know, in places where there were not hospitals before, schools, basements, etc. And then also the fact that a lot of medical staff has left. You know, the country. So then you face different, you know, paradigms. One is that a public hospital, which is giving a public service, is not in the most public and the most known place. It's end up, you know, like being something like clandestine. Okay, these kind of places, they are not well designed for providing medical care and medical assistance. They are using the things that they are left, not the things that they should be using. I mean, like a lot of times there is a lot of lack of material, lack of specialized skilled people. So, you know, doctors are working as surgeons, nurses are working as doctors, etc., because there is no people. And then also, well, at the end, what is happening is that it is being used what it is left, not what it is right to be used. You know, so this is leading to a kind of substandard, you know, medical aid, in the sense that the people is doing whatever they can, not whatever they should be doing. This is one thing. The second part is related to the length and the magnitude of the medical condition of the population. I mean, half of the population in Syria is moved from their places, either displaced or either refugee. So what happens is that and then also they are not reaching the medical facilities as easy as it was before. So you have non-related to violence, but indirectly affected by violence, a lot of conditions that are getting worse and worse. So children, they didn't get vaccination, or they are getting not a proper vaccination since 5 years ago. So all the children-related conditions are increasing and increasing. Okay, so measles, polio, things that they shouldn't be in Syria, they are appearing because they're. women, they are not going to prenatal or antenatal care, sessions. So each delivery, it becomes a surprise, and each delivery becomes a risky delivery. Old people who with communicable diseases, they are not able to get, treatment for simple conditions like hypertension or diabetes, and this, end up becoming a mortal risk, And then, of course, non-communicable diseases like cancer, etc., are very difficult to be treated. So, a lot of the population gets, their medical conditions worse and worse, and this is related to the lack of system and the lack of accessibility to the system.
Now let's take a look at what's on in Istanbul next week.
Today is St. Patrick's Day, celebrated in Beyoğlu's Corner Irish Pub. The sound of a bagpipe may welcome you at the entrance, but Irish DJ Remek will be spearheading the fun for the rest of the night. 13th Akbank Short Film Festival is on at Akbank Sanat, Beyoğlu until March 23rd.
خود زندگی به نظر من بیشتر تغییر ایجاد میکنه توی کار ما تا تأثیر فیلم‌های دیگه. شاید برای کسایی که فیلم زیاد میبینن این تأثیر رو بتونن از سینمای دیگران بگیرن، اما از اونجایی که من همیشه
This year's screenings have a special focus on Abbas Kiarostami, the celebrated Iranian director who passed away last year. One of today's best Latin jazz pianists, Gonzalo Rubalcaba, is performing at Istanbul tonight. The Cuban musician will be playing in memory of his friend, legendary double bass player Charlie Haydn. A concert not to miss for jazz lovers.
Creo que es una música que pretende representar.
Galerinev Istanbul presents a new solo show by Ali Kazma in Istanbul. The video was shot in Paşabahçe Glass Factory, where 1 million pieces, including 300,000 tea glasses, are produced daily.
Thanks for watching, and see you next week at 9 p.m. Bye.